God knows that we have no intention whatsoever to starve any Biafran children or to commit genocide against anybody.
But we are certainly not going to end the war on account of people being starved. All is fair in war, so we are told, and that is the position.
The plight of the civilians is not the number one priority.
But number one priority is the unity of the country.
While the relief flights have reduced dramatically the number of children and adults starving to death, down perhaps to 600 a week, from the high of several thousand a week last year.
This war was forced on us, and it has got to be fought for the sake of the country, for the sake of the millions of people in this country.
When I say without fighting, I do not mean there was no war. There was a war. Soldiers fought, soldiers died, bombs fell, but that is not what defeated Biafra. Nigeria did not win because they killed more soldiers. They did not win because they captured more land. They won by stopping food, by blocking medicine, by making millions of people hungry. And they told the world what they are doing. Chief Obafemi Awolowo, Nigerian finance minister, said, "All is fair in war, and starvation is one of the weapons of war, not in secret, not behind closed doors, in public." He said that openly. So did other government officials. From 1967 to 1970, Biafra was cut off by land, by sea, by air. Ships could not enter, food could not enter, medicine could not enter. So people began to starve. Children ate leaves, children ate grass, children died, thousands after thousands, months after months. This is not a story about battles. This is a story about hunger. A story about a government that used starvation as a weapon and a world that watched it happen. And Cormac, and this is Cormac Explains. Let me show you how it happened. Before you understand how Biafra lost, you need to look at one thing: the map. Not guns, not soldiers, the map. When Ojukwu declared Biafra independent in May 1967,
May 1967, eastern region of Nigeria declared independence from the rest of the country, calling themselves the Republic of Biafra.
the people celebrated. They had their own flags, their own country, their own future.
Freedom. I've never seen a day like that. Never. Never.
If our culture were to disappear, we would lose the will and strength to resist the principalities and powers of darkness and wrong. We would lose our identity, self-respect, and dignity.
But there was a problem. A country cannot survive on flag alone. It needs food, medicine, fuel, trade routes, and Biafra had a big weakness. Look at the map. To the north, east, and west is Nigeria. To the south is Atlantic Ocean. So Biafra was surrounded. No friendly neighbors, no escape routes, nowhere to bring in supplies. So the only opening was the coast. That meant one thing. If Nigeria controlled the roads, Biafra could not bring in food by land. If Nigeria controlled the sea, ships could not bring in supplies. If Nigerians controlled the air, planes could not deliver medications. Biafra did not need to be defeated in battle. It could be cut off, isolated, or starved. And that is exactly what the federal government realized. Wars are not always won by destroying armies. Sometimes you win by cutting the system that keeps the enemy alive. Think about a city. You don't need to destroy every building. Cut the electricity, cut the water, cut the food. The city will collapse on its own. The federal government used the same idea on Biafra. Not just an army, on the whole territory. By July 1967, the blockade was in place. The goal was simple: make it impossible for Biafra to survive. Not for a week, not for a month, for as long as it took. Because once supplies stop coming in, time becomes your enemy. And time was about to become Nigeria's most powerful weapon. Here is the part that still shocks me. They told the world what they are doing. Awolowo said, starvation is one of the weapons of war. Enahoro said, starvation is a legitimate weapon of war. Ayida said, we have every intention of using it against the rebels. These were not secret documents, they were not leaked, they were public statements.
So that we are completely cut off and they are in control of everything here, I am quite certain that they will really go to town and murder everything in sight.
In a nightmare period in which 1 out of 10, at least, of all their countrymen have died of starvation.
On record, they were saying, we are starving them and we are not sorry. And then there was Adekunle. He was a commander, a soldier. And he said, I want to prevent even one Igbo from having even one piece to eat before their capitulation. We shoot at everything that moves.
Colonel, I wonder if you know how concerned people outside Nigeria really are, including people in Britain, at the dangers of mass starvation.
This question of food or no food is just cockeyed. It's just a sort of cover plan. This country is independent and we're going to retain it that way, humanitarian reasons or not.
In interviews during the war, Adekunle also made his positions clear when questions came up about food and humanitarian concerns. He dismissed the idea that starvation had anything to do with the military plan. To him, it was not the point of the war. The point was control. It got so bad that even the Washington Post called it genocide. The Washington Post, not a Nigerian newspaper, not an African newspaper, an American newspaper. They wrote, one would now describe the policy of the Nigerian military government towards the secessionist Biafra. Genocide. It is ugly and extreme, but it is the only word that fits.
This year, it's a matter of life and death. There's been a war going on in West Africa. It's a civil war between the Biafrans and the Nigerians. We're not going to say which side is right or which side is wrong, except that all war is always wrong.
So why didn't they just fight? Because fighting cost money, starvation cost nothing. Nigerians had more soldiers, more weapons, more jets. Biafra was outnumbered, outgunned, surrounded. But they did not need to defeat Biafran's army. They just needed to make sure Biafran's people could not eat. Hunger does not complain. Hunger does not surrender. Hunger just kills. Slowly, quietly, one child at a time. And they told us they were doing it. The world heard them. The world watched. And the world did nothing. By 1968, the blockade had done its work. Children began to die. That is when the airlift became the only hope. The only way food and medicine could get into Biafra was by air. The blockade cut Biafra off. Land was blocked, sea was blocked. Only one way remained is the sky. But the sky was not safe. The airstrip was called Uli. It was not an airport. It was a stretch of road in the middle of nowhere, maybe 75 feet wide, palm trees on both sides. Imagine landing a big cargo train on a road at night in the dark, no lights. Miss a little and you hit a tree. Overrun the strip and you crash into the bush. One chance and that is all you got. During the day, Nigerian fighters' jets owned the sky. They had one pilot called the Intruder. He would circle the airstrip for hours, just waiting, jumping bombs sometimes, Then he would come back on the radio and mock the pilot below. Come on down and get killed. So the relief planes only flew at night. The planes were old, very old. DC-6s, DC-7s, C-97s, built in the 1950s, engines that could fail at any time. They flew from the island called Satome off the coast of Gabon to Biafra, about 2 hours. 2 hours over waters, 2 hours over jungles. If your engine failed, you were done. No parachute, no rescue, no one coming. Here is something most people do not know. On June 5th, 1969, Nigerian forces shot down a Red Cross plane. All 4 crew members died.
Since this airlift started, you've had 2 crashes, 4 pilots killed the other day. Have you any regrets that you started this enterprise?
No, I think that some people must die to save 9 million people to live. And I think that in saving people to live, we must be ready to die. Captain McComey, an English pilot, spoke to me a week ago, and he said, Father, even though the night raids at the airport in Biafra are very serious, we must continue to fly supplies to these starving people. And he said, I am prepared to lose my life in doing this work. Last Sunday, he lost his life, and I had to go to his wife and his young family and to the wives of the other pilots and tell them the sad news.
After that, the Red Cross stopped flying. They were afraid. But some doctors were furious. They said the Red Cross should keep flying. They should have spoken out. They should not have stayed silent. So they started their own organization. They called it the Medicine Sans Frontières. Doctors Without Borders. Because of that one plane, because of those 4 dead crew members, other people did not stay silent. A Swedish count named Carl Gustav bought 5 small planes. He painted them green. He fitted them with rockets. He called this squadron Biafra Babies. He attacked Nigerian Air Force with those tiny planes and destroyed several jets, including 3 out of 6 Soviet bombers. 1 man, 5 planes against an entire Air Force. Relief organizations kept flying. The pilots called themselves Jesus Christ Airlines. It was a joke, but it was also true. They were flying into hell with supplies. An Irish priest named Dermot Doran was the main person behind it all. He smuggled journalists into Biafra. He arranged the first flight. He bought food and medicine from Europe and America.
We had to buy planes in order to prove to these companies that it was worthwhile coming into this operation. Transair Sweden, Transavia, Fred Olsen, and all the other companies, some of the planes you see here, these have come into the operation after we had bought the planes.
You mean simply financially worthwhile?
Yes, financially worthwhile, and also, you know, then some people thought that Biafra was only it would only last a very short time, and therefore it wasn't worthwhile bringing planes down here. But in fact, it has been worthwhile for these people.
How much does it cost to keep the planes running, actually? I mean, to have your own planes at $75,000 each was quite a purchase, yes. But to keep them running...
Well, to charter one plane from here to Biafra cost me $2,900. And we have, as I say, chartered 850 so far, so the operation is extremely costly. But I think it's money well spent, because life is sacred. And we are serving not the government or the army, we are serving the ordinary civilian population, the women and the children who are starving and who are depending on our food. We believe that these children have a right to live. They have committed no crime. They know nothing about ideas like economic blockade, secession, or independence. All they know is that they are very, very hungry and they need food and need it urgently. And we feel that we have a moral obligation to keep these people alive.
Since this airlift started, you've had 2 crashes, 4 pilots...
Over time, the airlift brought in about 60,000 tons of AIDS. It was the largest civilian airlift in Asia at that time. But here's the problem. Biafra needed 500 tons of food every single day. The airlift brought in less than 100 tons per week. Week, not daily. Week. The system was never going to save anyone. In 1969, the United States was paying for almost half of the relief efforts. But President Johnson reportedly said to his staff, "Get those nigger babies off my TV set." The world watched, the world gave money, the world did not stop war. A student in America set himself on fire in front of the United Nations. He was protesting the genocide. He died the next day. John Lennon returned his MBE medal to the Queen, partially because of the beaten roles in the war. People tried, people screamed, but the war continued. Now, let me show you what people actually experienced. By 1969, the blockade has done its work. Children began to die. Their bodies could not fight the hunger. Their stomachs swelled from a disease called kwashiorkor, caused by lack of protein. Their hair turned orange, their skin cracked, their eyes went empty. A nun who ran a tiny clinic described what she saw. The malnutrition affects their intellects. Some mothers are so dizzy and weak that they forgot the names of their own babies. They were starving and their minds were going with their bodies. For families on the ground, the war changed. It was no longer about winning or losing. It was about surviving the week. Food became scarce. Families could no longer get fish, meat, milk, or even basic staples. They ate whatever they could find: leaves, grass, moths, anything that could fill their stomachs. But it was not food, it was just weight. Children need more nutrition than adults relative to their size. As the hunger got worse, their small bodies could not fight off infections. Disease became more deadly. At the feeding centers, hundreds lined up for a bowl of garri and fish soup. But scores were turned away. The nun said, "You can't take care of 25,000 people, you just pick the worst." And they had to choose who lived and who died every day. At the peak of the famine, aid workers estimated that 10,000 to 14,000 people were dying every single day. Not per week, per day. That is more than 400 people dying every hour, around the clock, every day for months. By the time the war ended, over 1 million Biafran civilians were dead. Most were children, not killed by bullets, not killed by bombs, killed by hunger. The war stopped being an abstract political struggle. It became the next thing that killed your child. The world saw the pictures, the world was horrified, but the world did nothing to stop it. By 1968, the war was no longer hidden. Photographs of starving Biafran children began appearing on the front of pages of newspapers around the world. London, Paris, New York, Rome. Millions of people who have never heard of Biafra were suddenly asking the same question. What is happening there? The images were impossible to ignore. Children with swollen stomachs, thin arms, weak bodies, mothers holding children who had not eaten properly in weeks, entire families surviving on almost nothing. The war was no longer just about soldiers, it was about civilians, and civilians were losing. People around the world were horrified. Churches raised money, students organized collections, families donated food, charities launched emergency appeals. For many ordinary people watching from far away, it felt like a famine happening in real time, a disaster they could see but they could not stop. As 1969 came to an end, Biafra was running out of every single thing: food, medicine, fuel, territory, time. And in war, time can be the deadliest enemy of all. In January 1970, Biafra surrendered. The guns fell silent. The fighting was over. But the photograph remained. The memory remained. The questions remained. Nigeria was one country again, but at what cost? Let me show you the twist. The federal government won. Nigeria was one country again. That was the goal. But look at what it cost. Over 1 million civilians died. Most were children. The federal government did not defeat Biafran army by capturing more territory or killing more soldiers. They starved families. They starved children. They starved the population into surrender, and they admitted it openly. Starvation is a legitimate weapon of war, not an accident, a strategy. The children who survived grew up with damaged bodies, weak minds, broken spirits. The blockade did not end when the war ended. The effect lasted for generations. So, here is the question nobody asks. Who really won? Nigeria remained one country. That was the federal government's goal. But can you call it a victory when you had to starve your own people to achieve it?
I have got nothing to hide. My conscience is clear. I've got moral standard. God knows that we have no intention whatsoever to starve any Biafran children or to commit genocide against anybody. This war was forced on us, and it has got to be fought for the sake of the country, for the sake of the millions of people in this country.
But those millions of Nigerians are not thinking mostly of the war. Their chief preoccupation is commerce. And war or not, business booms.
The twist is not that Nigeria won. The twist is that winning came at a cost that no one talks about. The blockade is not celebrated. The starvation is not remembered as a strategy. The children who died are not counted in victory parades. Some of the men who made the decisions are all dead and gone. So here's the question I will leave you with. If starvation is a weapon of war, who used it? And why are they still celebrated? But that is not the end of the story. The coup that started all this happened in 1966. One night, 22 people died, a country that never recovered. That is where the real change began. The man who fired the first shot was a young major named Nzog. The man who declared Biafra was Ojukwu. The man who led Nigeria through the war was Gowon. 3 men, 3 tragedies. That story will change how you see Biafra war forever. Click the video on your screen right now. I will see you there.